I'm pleased to present Hal Shevers, and we're not going to talk about Sporty's Pilot Shop. Sorry. We're going to talk about Sporty's Foundation. I work with a lot of interesting organizations, and when they're talking about building bridges to the public and doing charitable work, there's always this overhead and cost and so forth. And the thing that amazes me every time I look at the yearly statement from Sporty's is that whatever comes in goes out. Tell me how you came up with the Sporty's Foundation and how you were able to pull this off.
Well, first thing is I owe the Boy Scouts more than I can even pay them back. And I was invited to be on the Boy Scouts board in Cincinnati and accepted that, maybe 30 years ago. And from there, it's just more fun to give than it is to receive. And we've looked at, I've looked at a lot of charities, looking at their IRS Form 990, and realized there are so many charities that aren't really that charitable. No. So we have the Sporty's Foundation, and you're right, 100% of the donations go out. The Sporty's Foundation doesn't even pay for a postage stamp. It's all covered by Sporty's itself. And on top of that, Sporty's donates $10,000 a month to the foundation. The foundation has other donors, the biggest one being Sandy and me, but we've got some other very nice donors. They recognize that it's 100% getting mostly the kids. And that's what we're about. We're about the next generation of flyers and the people who design, build, and maintain the aircraft we fly.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's interesting about it is this seems to be a personal effort. There are people in this world that expect something for doing good things, and they're just people who go out and do the good things. In my experience in watching what you've done with it, and also keeping in mind that one of our projects actually benefited from contribution from the Sporty's Foundation, which was the memorial live stream of the Bob Hoover Memorial Celebration. I'm really kind of amazed that you can pull this off in this day and age. It's obviously from the heart, but what drives you?
I don't know. I wish I knew. It must have been the way I was brought up or something. It's I just feel Sandy and I have been extremely lucky. We've never inherited a thing. Mm-hmm. We're still waiting. I don't think. I think that's all gone by. I don't think we're going to ever inherit anything now. But we want to take care of the next generation. Then we do have other favorite things besides the kids. Besides aviation exploring, which is part of the Boy Scouts, used to be the Air Scouts, and then Young Eagles, of course. We just went through the 50,000th Young Eagle to sign on to Sporty's Learn to Fly course, and but that's not through the foundation, that's Sporty's itself. And you look at our annual report, and you'll see, this year's annual report, I think we bequested $400,000, but we had an exceptional year. And that won't happen. I don't think that's going to happen again, but then there's the money Sporty's gives, not through the foundation, and also Sandy and I do our share. But there are other things we like besides just the kids, like everything from the War in the Pacific Museum in we're at Germantown, Fredericksburg, Texas, the Air Force Museum, Dayton, Ohio, a project like you have, a Bob Hoover book. I mean, that hits the heart, that hits home.
Well, Sporty's has been virtually an institution in this industry for quite some time. And I would imagine that the notoriety and the legacy that you've established in this business, and now with the foundation, we get a lot of attention from people. How do you decide where to give and who to work with in regards to the foundation?
Well, a lot of it just comes from your heart. Once again, it's people write, oh, we have people say, well, I want to put on a program in podunk such and such, and I need $300 to do it. That's one of the easiest things in the world to do. Just fire out $300. Hey, let's see what they come up with. You can just risk it on that, 300, 500, 800.
Yeah.
And it's amazing what little programs go on in the United States with some guy that's, his heart feels good also, and about a project, and he makes it happen at a very low budget.
Now you get assistance though. I mean, there are other people that are donating to the Sporty's Foundation, is that correct?
We do, and want to thank them very, very much. There are probably another 40 people who donate to the Sporty's Foundation, and that probably comes up to close to $40,000 or $50,000 per year. And we'd like to make it more. Scholarships. Well, today I know a check went out to the Boy Scouts of America for $60,000 in scholarships for aviation explorers. And this, and it's not just for pilots. Obviously, it's for mechanics, something in aviation. And these, it breaks up into maybe 10 different scholarships. The best one is $10,000 a year for 4 years, and we send the money to the schools. And the schools are very good on this. Let's say a kid doesn't matriculate, the money comes back. And this is the way we want it. We want to make sure it really gets used for the proper purpose. Another thing we do, which I really like, right here at AEA, there are 2 $5,000 scholarships for AEA, an employee of an AEA company to get a recreational pilot certificate, or at least 5,000 will cover them to solo. We do that for women in aviation and a few other organizations.
Outstanding. Do you know my connection, by the way, with aviation exploring?
No, I do not.
When they first established the aviation exploring division of Boy Scouts of America, they held at that time this National President's Congress, where the presidents of all the explorer posts around the country would meet in Washington, D.C. This was the first year that aviation exploring existed as its own separate division. They elected 4 national officers from among the presidents of those groups.
Okay.
And I was one of the vice presidents selected. I forget how old I was. I was in my early teens. I came out of the Explorer Post in Teterboro, New Jersey, and stayed close to the program. And of course, it did me a world of good throughout the years. And it's one that I've greatly enjoyed watching over the years, and also meeting up with people from throughout the community that were affected by aviation exploring. It was pretty cool. I remember Jeff Light was president, and it was Jerry Keenan was one of our other VPs, and it was just an extraordinary group of people to work with, especially for a young kid who was barely driving at that stage of the game, and pretty cool. So I'm glad you selected an affiliation with aviation exploring. It's been near and dear to my heart.
So this must have been back in the 80s or late 70s, or I don't want to divulge how your age, but
let's see, this would be 70, 76, 77, 78 in that time period.
Now, aviation exploring was a lot bigger, and we had a fatal, I think, in 1984, and the Boy Scouts dropped the whole thing. There was no flying for 20 years. And we at least have a flying policy for the kids now.
Good.
And of course, they can individually, you can take the kids over and get them a Young Eagles ride.
There you go. Good stuff. Tell me about the Young Eagles program that you're working with them. That's turned into something huge. You said, was it 50,000 now? That's a lot of kids.
Well, there are 2 million that have, over 2 million have had a Young Eagles ride, but 50,000 of them have signed up for Sporty's Learn to Fly course. It all worked, the way it worked out, there was a gal up at Oshkosh. Her name was Katrina Bradshaw. Wonderful, actually she worked out of the Washington area, but she came to us and said, oh, this is in 2009. She came to us and said, how about giving 10 of your courses and we'll get them at random for the young Eagles? And I said, well, we're just about to have our course on the web. We're that close. And you got to remember, the DVD was 2001, and now this is 2009. And we're saying, I said, if this works out the way I think it will, we can give it to all the young Eagles.
That must have gotten their attention.
It definitely did. But going back further with the young Eagles, I remember at Oshkosh, Tom Poberezny called me into his office, and during AirVenture, it wasn't called AirVenture yet, but he had a little office in a little dirty old building next to the old exhibit buildings. So I went in there and he said that he had this idea of giving these kids a ride, and we're going to do 1 million of them. And I'm going, sure, Tom, You know, that's what's going through my mind. Yep. But anyhow, he told me more about it, and I said, well, we're certainly in. And I think we made a donation towards getting it started and continued. And then we came up the Young Eagles Lodge, which is up at Oshkosh. It's beautiful. The way that started, we wanted to do a lodge for aviation explorers. And Tom wanted it more EAA controlled, and can understand that. But anyhow, we made a $100,000 donation towards that lodge. Well, that was enough to attract Jim Ray, who has passed away recently. But anyhow, Jim Ray saw this project and saw there was $100,000 there, and wham, he pulled, it must have been $1 million or $1.5 million. That's one beautiful building.
Great effort, absolutely great effort.
But then moving on, Jim, over the years, this program's just grown and grown and grown. Now, when a kid comes in for his Young Eagle ride, along with the parental permission part, it runs through a computer in Oshkosh, which turns out the proper paperwork for them to get a certificate. Well, the certificate gets printed right at the point where the rubber meets the road, where the kid just got the ride. And then an email goes out to these kids saying, would you like to opt in to the Learn to Fly course? And as I said, we've mentioned, the 50,000th one was last month.
Outstanding. That's the kind of impact that it'll take a few years to really see it, but it's going to be phenomenal as it manifests itself in the real aviation community as these kids mature, as they grow up, as they take on, or as many of them will, take on flying careers. That's got to be immensely satisfying.
It is. You go through the course, and when you get to a certain point that you could take a written examination, the written examination gets paid for by others. And then when you get to a point where you could actually get a pilot's license, you're of age and ready, you can get a free first flying lesson. Then if you get in the aviation exploring program, there are other opportunities through there. As I say, we just there are going to be $60,000 worth of them.
Outstanding.
Now there aren't enough kids that complete the course, and I have trouble finding out. I've had trouble finding out what the number is, but no matter what it is, it's not enough.
Never.
That's the way I think.
I hear you. So where do you take the foundation from here?
I think we're going to keep it small and very direct. If we try to grow it too much, we're going to end up with a thing called overhead.
Yeah. Oh no.
You know, as long as I can keep doing
no overhead.
Right, no overhead. As long as I can keep doing it more or less on my own, and with some of the people that work part-time, there'll be no overhead.
Outstanding. That's just a great story. I wish it was told a little bit more. Excuse me.
Now, a question people often ask me is, when did I get my love for aviation? And the answer is, in the womb.
Yeah, oh, tell me about it. It's always there, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I know people acquired along the way, but I'll tell you what, I know from my earliest days, if there was an airplane overhead, I looked up. I mean, from the time I could raise my head, I guess. And thankfully, my pop would take myself and some of my brothers and sisters out to the local airport and watch the airplanes take off and land. And my brothers and sisters weren't that entertained, but I sure was. And pretty cool, pretty amazing what kind of impact and what kind of life it gives us. I mean, I look at people who do the 9 to 5 thing. To them, it's 9, 5, go home, do it again Monday through Friday, and try to find something to do on weekends. And I just cannot believe that kind of desperation. If you're an aviator, there's always something to do. There's always something to be interested. There's always something to learn. Mm-hmm. And of course, you're part of a community. And it's amazing stuff.
It's pretty good. People ask me when I'm going to retire, and I tell them you'll read about it the day after I retire. It will be in the obituary column.
People have asked me, I said, but when they close the lid. There you go. Hal, I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us. We sure appreciate it. Love the work that you're doing with the foundation. Let's you and I talk down the line about how we can help support, publicize, promote your efforts, and more important, get as many good people involved to help you do even greater things within the limits of trying to keep from having to incur an overhead.
Well, it's just been a wonderful life, and I think I only have another 30 or 40 good years, and I'm going to make the best of them.
I'll be right there with you, man.
Okay.
Deal.
Thanks,
all righty.
Aero-News Network's coverage of the 61st Annual AEA International Convention and Trade Show, live from Las Vegas, is brought to you in part by the following sponsors.
Avidyne is the pilot-centric innovator. If you look at Avidyne's 20-plus year history, we had the first moving map, full color, that had everything on it. We were the first ones to do a primary flight display for general aviation. Avidyne has lots of opportunities and things in the works that will continue the leadership role we played in the past of coming up with new concepts and always having the best user interface to them.
It's called Airtext Plus. The mobile office is now a true, cost-effective win-win reality because being available and part of the communication chain keeps you in control. Visit us at www.airtext.aero for more information and get started staying in touch today.